Thank you for joining me for this Grow at Home overview video. This week we begin our September unit of study. In September, our Bible books are the Old Testament poetry books. Our Bible events come from the United Kingdom era, and for our Bible teachings we return to the Ten Commandments. In this first week of September, we look at the book of Job. We study events that focus on King Saul and introduce David, and then we'll finish by looking at the fourth commandment. There are 5 books in the Old Testament that we label the poetry books. These books are primarily Hebrew poetry and wisdom literature. Job is rare in this collection of books in that it starts and ends with a story, and the middle consists of poetry and wisdom. We'll look at the narrative parts of Job in the Bible events during the 3rd week in November. Job is a man who wonders why he is suffering. Then Job talks to 3 friends who start off okay just sitting with Job in his anguish. But once they start opening their mouths to counsel Job, they become what he calls physicians of no value. We have to keep something in mind as we read the words of these friends. Even though what they say is accurately printed in our Bibles, what they are saying is often not true. We only learn this at the end of the book when God tells the 3 friends, "My wrath is kindled against you, for you have not spoken of me what is right." Basically, they say Job must have sinned to deserve all the suffering he is experiencing. And Job, though he admits he is a sinner, can't identify anything he did that would deserve this much suffering from God. Finally, God joins the conversation in the final chapters. But he doesn't answer Job's question of why, except to say, "Can you do everything I can do? Can you know everything I know?" Obviously not, so you need to trust me. And that is what we need to remember when we ask the why questions of God. God has his reasons, and we need to trust him. He has our eternal best interest at heart. We move from reading Bible events in the Promised Land era to Bible events in the United Kingdom era, when all 12 tribes of Israel are ruled by a common king. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, the people ask Samuel for a king, like all the other nations have. Samuel feels that this is a rejection of his leadership, but God says they are really rejecting God himself as their king. He has Samuel tell the people what life will be like under a king and how much it will cost them. But they don't care. They see a king as being the solution to all their problems. In 1 Samuel chapters 9 through 10, we see Samuel anoint Saul as the first king of Israel. Twice. Once privately and once publicly. When Saul is chosen by Lot to be the king, he is found hiding among the baggage. As we work through the lives of the 3 kings of the United Kingdom era, Saul, David, and Solomon, I want you to picture a roller coaster track. At first, everything will seem to be going good for the king as he steadily rises in popularity among the people. And then each king will hit a point where sin will cause everything in his reign to descend with alarming speed. Saul's big sin is recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 15, where he is told to wipe out the Amalekites and everything in their camp. But Saul and the people spared Agag, the Amalekite king, as well as the best of the sheep, oxen, fattened calves, and the lambs. Samuel confronts Saul for not obeying God's word, and as he turns to leave, Saul grabs Samuel's robe and it tears. Samuel tells Saul, "Yahweh has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you." This person Samuel speaks of is David, who is anointed in 1 Samuel chapter 16. Samuel is sent to Jesse's house to anoint one of his sons as the king to succeed Saul. Samuel is impressed with one of Jesse's older sons, but God reminds Samuel, "Do not look at his outward appearance or on the height of his stature, for Yahweh does not see as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but Yahweh looks on the heart." The Spirit of God is removed from Saul and replaced by a harmful spirit. And Saul often finds himself battling with deep bouts of depression. David, the secretly anointed next king of Israel, is brought in to play his harp and cheer Saul up. Thus begins what will be a tenuous relationship between Saul and David throughout the remainder of 1 Samuel. We return to our walk through the Ten Commandments. We looked at the first 3 commandments back in July. This week, we look at the 4th commandment, honor your father and your mother. In his meaning, Martin Luther reminds us that while this commandment does concern how we treat our parents, it is also about how we treat all those in authority over us. Question 25 tells us that God has placed leaders over us in the home, at church, and in our world and communities. Question 26 shows us how we sin against our parents and leaders when we despise them or anger them, while question 27 shows us that we are to honor, serve, and obey them, and hold them in love and esteem. The only time we are not to obey these authorities, according to question 28, is when they are commanding us to disobey God's word. As Peter said in Acts 5:29, we must obey God rather than men. May God bless this new month of study and the time you spend daily remaining in God's word.